Let me say something that is going to make a lot of you immediately want to scroll to the comments. The Lich is not a villain. Now, before you close the tab, hear me out, because I'm not saying the Lich is misunderstood in the way Simon Petrikov is misunderstood. I'm not saying he has a sad backstory that explains his behavior, or that deep down he just needs a hug and a juice box and everything will be fine. I'm saying something considerably weirder than that. I'm saying that within the internal logic of Adventure Time's universe, the Lich was never operating as a villain at all. He was operating as something far more fundamental than that. And the show, from its very first serious moment, was quietly, almost sneakily, laying out every single piece of evidence you need to prove it. This is going to require us to go pretty deep. We're talking multiverse structure, ancient cosmic entities, the nature of entropy, and one very specific line from a purple comet that I think most people heard and then immediately moved past without realizing it just reframed the entire show from the ground up. So let's build the case from the beginning. The first thing we need to establish is what kind of universe Adventure Time actually takes place in. Because if you watch the early seasons, you could be forgiven for thinking this is just a fun little fantasy world with a clean moral structure. Good guys, bad guys, magic, adventure, Finn fights evil, evil gets its butt kicked, everyone goes home happy, maybe Jake makes a sandwich. But the further the show goes, the more it pulls back the curtain and shows you that its universe is not built on that kind of simple good versus bad architecture at all. Adventure Time's universe is ancient, cyclical, and governed by forces that exist completely outside of human concepts like good and evil. There are cosmic entities older than civilization. There are time rooms that exist between realities. There are catalyst comets that reincarnate every 1,000 years, carrying some fundamental essence that gets redistributed into new life forms. There are multiversal wish granters who live in a space between timelines just vibing and making pickles. This is not a world where evil is just a personality trait some guys have. This is a world with a cosmology, a structured metaphysical system underneath all the goofiness and the candy people and the talking rainicorns. And once you start paying attention to that system, really paying attention, the Lich stops looking like a villain and starts looking like something else entirely. He starts looking like a function. Let's talk about what the Lich actually wants, because this is where I think people get it wrong almost immediately. The common read is that the Lich wants to destroy all life because he's evil, and that's what evil does. He's the big bad. Destruction is his whole thing. He's the guy you put on a poster when you want something to look menacing. And look, fair enough, the dude is terrifying. The hollow eyes, the green fire, the voice that sounds like it crawled out of the bottom of a very bad dream. On a surface level, he is absolutely playing the villain role, but if you actually pay close attention to how the show frames his motivation across every single appearance, it's never quite that simple. The Lich doesn't destroy things out of malice. He doesn't twirl a metaphorical mustache about it. He doesn't gloat the way a traditional villain would. Doesn't monologue about his personal grudges against the world or how everyone wronged him and now they're gonna pay. There's no wounded ego driving him. No petty revenge fantasy. Nothing like that. What he says consistently across every appearance is something way more chilling than any of that. Because it doesn't sound like hatred at all. It sounds like doctrine. Not the servant of GOLB, not the mindless weapon of GOLB, not even the worshiper of GOLB, the scholar. And that word matters enormously. A scholar doesn't just follow orders. A scholar studies something. A scholar understands something deeply enough to dedicate their entire existence to carrying its meaning forward. The Lich isn't some brainless destructive force acting on instinct. He has understood something fundamental about the nature of reality, specifically about what GOLB represents, and he is acting in complete deliberate accordance with that understanding. So the question we actually need to be asking is not what does the Lich want? The question is, what on earth is GOLB, and what does it mean that the most terrifying being in ooze speaks in its name? GOLB, for those who need a quick refresher, is introduced properly in the finale as this absolutely massive ancient entity that exists outside of the multiverse entirely. And the show is pretty upfront about what GOLB represents. GOLB is chaos. Not chaos in the fun, wild adventure sense. Not the kind of chaos that makes for a good dungeon run. Chaos in the deep philosophical, cosmological sense. The dissolution of order, the undoing of structure, the return of all organized things to a state of total formless entropy. And here is where it gets genuinely interesting, because GOLB is not presented as evil in the finale. The show doesn't treat him the way it treats a regular antagonist. He doesn't get a defeat scene, he doesn't get a redemption arc, he doesn't get reasoned with or outsmarted or punched into submission. He is simply returned to wherever he came from when the music pushes him back. He came somewhere he doesn't normally go, caused absolute mayhem just by existing there, and then left. That framing is doing a lot of work, because it means the show is telling us right at the very end that GOLB is not malevolent. He's elemental. He's what exists when existence itself starts breaking down. He's not coming after anybody personally. He just is. And the Lich is his scholar, which means the Lich is not an agent of evil. He is an agent of entropy, and those are not even close to the same thing. Now let me bring in Prismo, because Prismo is genuinely the key to understanding the multiverse layer of this whole argument, and I think people get so caught up in how delightful he is as a character, which fair, the guy's a blast, that they kind of miss how much his existence reveals about the show's cosmological structure. Prismo is a wish granter who exists in a time room outside of regular space-time. He can grant literally any wish. He has watched countless timelines play out. He is, by his own description, the living manifestation of a sleeping old man's dream, which is already the most Adventure Time sentence I have ever said out loud. But the thing about Prismo that matters most for this argument is what his existence tells us about how Adventure Time's multiverse actually works. The multiverse in this show is not infinite in a random, chaotic, anything goes kind of way. It has structure, it has rules, wishes have loopholes, timelines can be altered, but the changes ripple outward in specific ways. There is an underlying architecture holding all of it together. Reality in this universe is a system, a complicated, layered, occasionally ridiculous system, but a system nonetheless. And the Lich understands that system deeply. In fact, the Lich might understand it better than almost any other character in the entire show. When he finally gets access to Prismo's time room, the one place in existence where reality itself can be rewritten, his wish is not impulsive. It is not emotionally driven. It is not the wish of someone acting out of anger or fear or wounded pride. Not the conquest of Ooh. Not revenge against Finn or Billy or anyone who ever fought him. Not personal power, not a kingdom. The extinction of all life. Clean, total, cosmologically precise. And when you frame that as a wish made by a scholar of GOLB standing in a room that exists outside of time itself, it stops sounding like villainy and starts sounding like a thesis statement. The Lich went to the one place in existence where reality can be rewritten and used it to attempt to complete what he understands to be his entire purpose: the return of all organized things to entropy, to GOLB, to the formless state that existed before structure had the nerve to show up and make everything complicated. That is not evil. That is cosmological consistency. That is a being doing exactly what it was built to do. Let me push this even further, because I think the Comet scene in the season 6 finale is the single most important piece of evidence for this entire argument, and it gets glossed over in a way that genuinely drives me a little crazy. The Comet tells Finn something extraordinary. It explains that across its many cycles of reincarnation, across all the forms it has taken over thousands of years, it has embodied two fundamental forces. One of them is Finn. All that is good, all that is life-affirming, all that chooses connection and experience and growth and caring about your friends enough to do something insane like build a tower into space just to punch your deadbeat dad. So if Finn, who is unambiguously genuinely good, is one face of this cosmic coin and the Lich is the other face of the exact same coin, then calling the Lich evil is like calling winter evil because it kills the flowers that summer grew. It's a category error. You are applying a moral framework to something that operates completely outside of morality and always has. Now, here's the counter argument I know some of you are already cooking up, and I want to address it directly because it is a genuinely fair one. You might be saying, okay, sure, the Lich might be some big cosmic entropy force, very philosophical, very impressive, but he still possesses innocent people. He still manipulates and deceives and causes real suffering to real characters we care about. He wore Billy's skin for math's sake. He turned a snail into a sleeper agent for like 3 seasons. He mind-controlled Finn, who was 13 years old and just trying to do his best. Even if his ultimate purpose is cosmologically neutral, his methods absolutely are not. Doesn't that make him evil on a practical level, even if not on a philosophical one? And look, I hear that. I really do. The Billy thing especially is deeply messed up, and I talked at length about how traumatic that moment was for Finn, and I stand by every word of it. But here's the thing, a hurricane causes suffering too. A wildfire tears through things that matter enormously to the people who lose them. A virus does not stop to consider the pain it causes on its way through a population. And we don't sit here and call those things evil. We call them forces of nature operating according to their own internal logic, completely indifferent to the emotional experience of the beings unlucky enough to be caught in their path. The Lich's indifference is not cruelty, it is consistency. He is not enjoying the suffering he causes. He is not motivated by it or energized by it the way an actual sadistic villain would be. He moves through the world the way entropy moves through a closed system. Not with malice, not with glee, just with inevitability. The suffering is incidental to the function, and that is a fundamentally different thing from evil, even if it feels identical from the receiving end. Let me bring up one more piece of evidence, and it's something the show puts right in front of us in the very first serious Lich episode and then never really draws attention to again. In Mortal Folly, when the Lich takes control of Finn through the broken charm, he doesn't try to kill him. He tries to walk him into the well of power. He wants to use Finn as a tool for a specific purpose. And when Finn breaks free, which incredible moment, by the way, the boy resisted mind control with a sweater, absolute legend. The Lich doesn't react with rage. He doesn't throw a tantrum. He doesn't take it personally at all. He just pivots immediately, calmly, onto the next approach. That detachment is the tell. A real villain, a personally motivated villain, would be furious that the kid beat him, would make it about Finn, would come back specifically to settle that score. The Lich never does that. Finn is not his nemesis in any meaningful sense. Finn is an obstacle that appears occasionally in the path of a process, and the process is always what matters. Always the function, always entropy moving toward its conclusion. The show told us this from day one. We just read it as villainy because that was the easier and more comfortable frame, because we were watching through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy who sorts everything into evil and then punches it. And from that angle, of course, the Lich looks like a villain. Everything scary looks like a villain from that angle. That's just how being 12 works. But the show was always operating on a level above that framing, quietly, patiently, hiding a genuine cosmological argument inside what looked on the surface like a goofy cartoon about a kid and his magic dog. And the further it went, the more it asked us to look up from Finn's perspective and try to actually see what was going on. So here is where I land, and I want to be clear that I am not arguing the Lich is secretly good, or that we should feel bad for him, or that Finn was wrong to fight him every single time they cross paths. None of that. Finn's resistance to the Lich is just as natural and just as valid as the Lich's drive toward entropy. That is literally the point. They are opposing forces in a balanced system, and both of them are doing exactly what they are cosmologically supposed to do. It's almost kind of beautiful in the most deeply unsettling way imaginable. Drop your take in the comments, because I genuinely want to know if I've convinced you or if you think I've completely lost the plot. Leave a like if you want more of this kind of deep dive, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you in the next one.